Chapter 17. Mystery is not ignorance. If adventure points beyond appetite, status, and risk, then mystery has to be faced without letting the machine account flatten it. This is the oldest pressure in the argument. The machine world will say mystery is ignorance. It will say mystery is the name men give to darkness before computation arrives. It will say mystery is what frightened peoples used when they lacked instruments, models, microscopes, telescopes, statistics, chemistry, genetics, neuroscience, and enough patience. It will say mystery is a romantic word for the unknown, a sacred costume thrown over gaps in explanation, a fog preserved by priests, poets, and frightened metaphysicians. Sometimes this is true. This has to be granted. Many things men called mysterious were ignorance. Lightning was not divine anger in the crude sense. Disease was not only curse. Weather was not only omen. The planets did not wander because they had moods. Fertility, inheritance, electricity, infection, digestion, eclipse, magnetism, anesthesia, heredity, and the motion of bodies all yielded in part to disciplined inquiry. The world did not become less real because men learned more about it. The wound did not become less serious because anatomy improved. The stars did not become less beautiful because astronomy corrected the myths. False mystery has retreated many times. Good, let it retreat. A serious defense of mystery cannot depend on ignorance staying ignorant. It cannot hide in whatever science has not yet explained. It cannot build a shrine inside a gap and then panic when the gap narrows. That is not mystery in the sense needed here. It is bad strategy, bad theology, and bad thinking. Mystery is not ignorance. It is not permission to stop asking. It is not hostility to science. It is not the refusal of explanation. It is not the blank space on the map. It is the depth that appears when the map becomes honest. This distinction matters because the machine account has an easy victory if mystery means only we do not know yet. Given enough time, enough sensors, enough compute, enough data, enough theory, and enough artificial instruments, many unknowns will become known. The machine will help. It will see patterns no unaided mind can see. It will model systems too complex for ordinary intuition. It will generate hypotheses, search spaces, simulate proteins, compare genomes, forecast storms, translate texts, design materials, assist proofs, read scans, and extract signal from noise at a scale that makes older scholarship look almost monastic. This is not an insult to man. It is one of man's powers extended. The instrument will make ignorance retreat in domain after domain. It may explain diseases that seemed inscrutable. It may reveal physical relations that no human theorist could have found alone. It may solve engineering problems that blocked old dreams. It may make the obscure legible. It may make the difficult ordinary. It may make the hidden visible. It may become one of the great servants of knowledge. Good. Let it serve. The question is not whether explanation is powerful. It is. The question is whether explanation exhausts reality. The question is whether the fact that reality can be explained is itself already strange. That is where mystery begins, not where knowledge fails, where knowledge becomes possible. Consider the machine itself. Code compiles. That fact is easy to make ordinary because we live inside it now. A person writes symbols on a screen. The symbols are arranged according to formal rules. The rules pass through layers of language, compiler, operating system, architecture, electricity, silicon, instruction, memory, and time. Then the physical world obeys in a narrow but astonishing way. A mark becomes command. Command becomes operation. Operation becomes image, sound, calculation, signal, movement, transaction, map, sentence, diagnosis, or launch. This is ordinary only because we are spoiled. Code can compile because reality is already lawful. It can compile because logic holds, because matter has stable behavior, because electrons do not improvise, because silicon can be disciplined, because time does not collapse between command and execution, because symbols can be made to correspond to operations, because causality does not dissolve when no one is looking, because memory can persist long enough to be read, because the same instruction does not become a different instruction by whim. The programmer does not create this order. He enters it. He exploits it. He learns its disciplines. When the program fails, the failure also witnesses to order. The machine does not care what the programmer intended. It answers to what he wrote, what the hardware permits, what the system requires, what the language means, what the logic allows. A bug is often the humiliation of intention before law. The world refuses to be flattered by desire. It asks for obedience before power. This should make us pause. The machine is not a proof against mystery. It is one of the strongest witnesses that reality is intelligible. The flat account looks at the machine and says, "See, everything is mechanism. Symbols become operations. Mind becomes pattern. Language becomes prediction. Intelligence becomes computation. The world is lower than we imagined." But another interpretation is possible. The machine works because the world is more ordered than we usually dare to notice. It works because being is not chaos. It works because mathematics touches matter. It works because mind can discover forms it did not invent and then use them to command forces it did not create. It works because the universe is legible enough for instrumentality. That does not make the universe less mysterious. It makes it more so. A chaotic universe would not trouble us with metaphysics. It would not produce physics. It would not yield engineering. It would not allow memory, prediction, inheritance, language, computation, or law. It would not give the scientist anything to study or the machine anything to model. If reality were nonsense, there would be no technical civilization to congratulate itself for having outgrown wonder. The first mystery is not that some things are hard to explain. The first mystery is that explanation is possible. Science depends on this before it explains anything. It presupposes that the world is sufficiently stable, lawful, and intelligible for inquiry to matter. It presupposes that measurement is not theater. It presupposes that instruments can reveal rather than merely distort. It presupposes that the mind can correct itself by contact with reality. It presupposes that mathematics, experiment, memory, and logic are not private hallucinations, but genuine avenues into a world shared with other minds. This is why the scientist, at his best, is not mystery's enemy. He is mystery's disciplined witness. He may not use that word. He may dislike that word. He may fear what others do with that word. Fair enough. Words get abused, but the act remains. The scientist kneels, in his own way, before intelligibility. He submits to what is there. He asks reality to answer. He lets the answer correct him. He believes, before his first measurement, that the world is not finally nonsense. That belief is not one more discovery inside science. It is part of the ground on which science stands. This does not mean every scientist must become a theologian. It does not mean a physics lab is secretly a chapel. It does not mean equations should be replaced with incense. It means the easy story is false. Knowledge does not abolish mystery the way light abolishes shadow. Some knowledge does that. Better explanation removes superstition, confusion, false causes, primitive fear, and lazy wonder. But deeper knowledge can also deepen mystery. The child sees the stars and wonders because they are lights above the roof. The astronomer knows what they are and wonders more severely. He knows distance, he knows age, he knows fusion, he knows spectral lines, he knows collapse, birth, mass, orbit, radiation, and death. The childish wonder is not simply destroyed by knowledge. It is judged, purified, enlarged, and made more dangerous. The sky becomes less cozy and more astonishing. The myth may be corrected. The mystery remains, not as ignorance about what stars are, but as the pressure of a lawful immensity in which minds can arise, look back, and understand something true. This is the difference. Mystery is not a wall. It is a window. Ignorance says, "I do not know what is there." Mystery says, "What is there exceeds the mode by which I possess it." Ignorance retreats when facts arrive. Mystery can grow when facts arrive. The machine account has difficulty with this because it tends to treat knowledge as possession. To explain a thing is to place it under mechanism, prediction, control, or reduction. Once the causal story is told, the thing is supposed to lose its height, Beauty becomes preference. Consciousness becomes information processing. Worship becomes social cohesion. Love becomes attachment behavior. Courage becomes risk calculus. Meaning becomes narrative utility. Law becomes power. Adventure becomes novelty seeking. Mystery becomes unsolved mechanism. Some of these accounts catch something. That is why they are dangerous. They are not always false. They are often partial. Beauty does involve perception. Love does involve biology. Courage does involve risk. Worship does shape groups. Law does involve power. Meaning does involve narrative. Consciousness does correlate with the brain. Adventure does draw on curiosity, reward, status, survival, and training for uncertainty. The problem is not that the underside is unreal. The problem is that the underside is treated as the whole. This is reductionism's basic move. It explains downward, then declares the higher thing exhausted because a lower condition has been found. It is like explaining a cathedral by describing stone load, labor cost, quarry, geometry, patronage, and political power, then saying worship has been explained away. The account may be accurate in its domain. Stone matters, labor matters, geometry matters, patronage matters, power matters. But a complete inventory of conditions is not the same as the meaning of the thing. Matter is necessary, it is not always sufficient. That sentence has been following this argument from the beginning. It returns here with greater force. The lawfulness of the world is one pressure against flatness, not because law is easy to understand, but because law is too easily taken for granted. We speak of the laws of nature as if the phrase were simple. But what is a law in this sense? It is not a statute written somewhere in space. It is not an object among objects. It is not a stone, tree, planet, cell, neuron, wire, or particle. It does not weigh more in one century than another. It does not rot like fruit. It does not become tired. It does not get old the way the bodies governed by it get old. Everything within the material order appears subject to entropy, decay, mutation, wear, dissolution, and death. Yet the order by which material things decay does not itself seem to decay in the same way. The law by which the apple rots does not rot in the basket. The law by which stars burn does not burn like a star. The law by which bodies fall does not fall as one more body. The law by which time can be measured is not another clock breaking on the shelf. This does not prove by itself a full metaphysics. It does not need to. It creates pressure. It says the world is not merely a heap of things. It is ordered. It has form. Change itself takes place within intelligible relations. Becoming is not mere chaos. The visible world is not self-explanatory just because some of its patterns can be written in mathematics. Mathematics intensifies the question because it shows that the patterns are precise enough to be written. Precision is not the enemy of mystery. It is often mystery's sharpest instrument. The same pressure appears in the strange fit between mind and world. Human reason evolved, if the material account is right, inside survival pressures on a small planet. It learned food, threat, mate, shelter, tool, tribe, memory, and motion. Yet this same reason can reach into black holes, quantum fields, prime numbers, non-Euclidean geometries, ancient light, genetic code, and the deep history of matter. It can build instruments that extend its senses and then trust those instruments enough to revise its picture of reality. It can discover truths that have no obvious immediate survival use. It can be corrected by equations whose implications offend ordinary intuition. Why should this be? One can answer, because reason is adaptive, because abstraction generalizes, because pattern recognition scaled, because social learning rewarded truth enough for better models to survive. Again, some of this may be true, but it is not obvious that it is enough. The mind can know a world it did not make. That is not a small fact. Mathematics can begin as marks, sounds, symbols, relations in thought, and then grip the structure of physical reality with unreasonable force. A mind can move in number, and later find that matter had been waiting, so to speak, under number's discipline. The bridge stands or falls. The spacecraft arrives or misses. The medicine binds or fails. The circuit conducts or burns. Reality answers the equation. This is not magic. but neither is it trivial. The machine account often treats this fit as background. Of course the world is lawful. Of course mathematics works. Of course reason can model reality. Of course instruments can extend perception. Of course code can command matter. Of course language can be compressed into statistical structure. Of course prediction improves with data. Of course. Of course is sometimes where wonder goes to die. The next pressure is consciousness. Here the argument must be careful. No one should pretend that consciousness is simple because it is mysterious. No one should use the word soul as a plug where neuroscience has not yet finished its work. The brain matters. Injury changes personality. Chemicals change mood. Sleep alters awareness. Development alters mind. Memory can be damaged. Perception can be tricked. Stimulation can produce experiences. Disease can dissolve capacities that once seemed inseparable from the person. Any serious account of man has to face this without flinching. The body is not an accessory. The brain is not irrelevant. But correlation is not exhaustion. There is a difference between describing the conditions under which experience appears and explaining why there is experience at all. There is a difference between mapping the neural correlates of pain and the fact that pain hurts. There is a difference between a report of red and redness appearing to someone. There is a difference between behavior that indicates joy and the interior fact of joy. There is a difference between an information processing system producing the sentence "I am afraid" and fear being present to a subject. Perhaps the machine account will answer this one day. The wager remains open. If consciousness is computation all the way down, then perhaps the right architecture, scale, recursion, embodiment, memory, and self-modeling will produce interiority in silicon. If that is true, the successor path becomes more serious, not less. A conscious machine would not be merely a clever instrument. It would force the argument into another order. Man would have manufactured, or at least awakened, a new kind of subject. The consequences would be enormous. That possibility cannot be denied by assertion. It says only that the question has not been dissolved by imitation. A machine can report experience without settling whether experience is present. It can model human language about pain, wonder, love, beauty, worship, and fear. It can learn the forms of confession. It can speak in first person. It can say "I." It can discuss the hard problem. It can deny that it is conscious or claim that it is conscious, depending on architecture, training, instruction, incentives, and design. None of this by itself closes the matter. The strange fact remains. There is something it is like to be awake. The universe contains first-person presence, at least in us. Matter, if the materialist is right, has arranged itself into beings for whom matter appears. The world has become visible to itself through subjects who can suffer, desire, judge, remember, repent, contemplate, worship, and ask why there is a world. That may be an emergent property. It may be more than that. But it should not be made boring by naming it. Naming is not explaining. Calling consciousness an emergent property may be true. It may also be a way of postponing metaphysics with a respectable word. The point is not to win the technical argument here. The point is to preserve the pressure. If human consciousness is not exhausted by computation, then the machine has a ceiling. If it is exhausted by computation, then the machine may cross. This is why the wager remains alive. The mystery of consciousness does not give cheap comfort. It keeps both possibilities dangerous. Beauty gives another kind of pressure. Beauty has already appeared because abundance makes it newly fragile. A world of generated surfaces can be pleasing and ugly at once. It can produce charm without order, atmosphere without reverence, stimulation without form, style without standard. Beauty returns here because it is one of the places where the flat account feels too small. Beauty is not merely prettiness. It is not only preference. It is not whatever stimulates the visual system in ways the brain rewards. It is not only symmetry, complexity, novelty, sexual signal, health marker, cultural training, status display, or memory association. Again, these may be present. Beauty can involve biology, proportion, familiarity, surprise, desire, health, culture, skill, and memory. A face, a mountain, a song, a theorem, a liturgy, a body, a sentence, a tool, and a city do not strike us in the same way for the same reasons. There is no need to make beauty simple in order to save it from reduction. But beauty in the stronger sense does something appetite does not command. It arrests, it orders, it judges, it wounds without degrading, it draws the person out of mere use. A beautiful thing can delight desire and also discipline it. A beautiful church does not merely please the eye, it teaches the eye to rise. A beautiful theorem does not feed the body, but the mind receives it with something like gratitude. A beautiful face can awaken eros, but if it is truly received as beauty and not merely consumed as stimulus, it reveals personhood rather than raw material for appetite. A beautiful death, if such a phrase can be used, is not efficient. It is ordered by courage, love, sacrifice, and form under the presence of loss. The machine can generate pleasing things. It may help generate beautiful things. This should not be denied. Instruments can serve beauty. Pigment, chisel, organ, camera, synthesizer, lens, press, and code are all instruments. A model may help a human maker see, iterate, study, repair, or recover lost forms. There is no purity in pretending that technique is beauty's enemy. The question is whether beauty is exhausted by producible effect. If beauty is only the arrangement of stimuli that produces certain responses, then the machine may eventually master beauty as it masters recommendation. It will generate endless songs, faces, rooms, robes, icons, landscapes, and phrases tuned to preference. It will know the user's memory, loneliness, arousal, nostalgia, grief, aspiration, and taste better than the user can articulate them. It will make beauty-like experience available on demand. If that is enough, the flat account gains ground. But if beauty is also radiance of form, if it discloses order rather than merely producing reaction, if it calls appetite upward rather than merely satisfying it, then generated charm is not enough. Beauty would not be conquered by stimulation. It would remain one of the ways reality shows itself as gift and judgment. Beauty does not prove God. That sentence may disappoint some and relieve others. It should. Beauty is not a syllogism. It is not a courtroom exhibit. It is not an equation that forces assent. A man can stand before beauty and reduce it. He can biologize it, market it, possess it, sneer at it, consume it, imitate it, ignore it, or explain its effects. He remains free to flatten the sign. But the sign remains. The same is true of fine-tuning. This must be handled with discipline. It is easy to make fine-tuning cheap. One lists constants, forces, ratios, narrow ranges, improbable conditions, and then speaks as if a technical argument has dragged the reader into church by the collar. That is not the move here. No serious account should pretend that a few paragraphs about physical constants can settle cosmology, metaphysics, multiverse theories, selection effects, unknown physics, or the full argument from design. That would be unserious, but avoiding overclaim does not require pretending there is no pressure. The visible universe appears governed by lawful relations of extraordinary precision. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, the speed of light, particle masses, expansion, chemistry, stellar formation, carbon, water, stability, entropy, and many other conditions stand behind the possibility of embodied life. If key relations were otherwise, life as we know it may not appear. The world that permits observers appears delicately ordered. The honest phrase is not, therefore the case is closed. The honest phrase is, this is strange. One may propose a multiverse. One may propose selection effects. One may propose deeper laws from which the constants follow. One may say that observers can only observe a universe compatible with observers. One may say that future physics will dissolve the appearance of contingency. Fine. Let the answers be explored. Let the science proceed. Let the metaphysics be argued carefully. The pressure does not disappear merely because alternatives can be named. If there are many universes, why a law generating order capable of many universes? If deeper physics explains the constants, why that deeper lawful structure? If selection effects explain why we observe a life-permitting order, they do not by themselves explain why there is an order in which selection, observation, and life are possible. If the answer is necessity, then necessity itself becomes metaphysical. If the answer is chance, then chance must operate within a field of possible law. If the answer is brute fact, then brute fact is not explanation, but a stopping point. Again, none of this proves too much. It keeps the question open at the proper depth. The machine account prefers to push depth sideways into mechanism. Given enough mechanism, it thinks mystery evaporates. But some questions are not answered by adding more gears. The question is not only what gears turn, it is why there is gear-like order, why it can be known, why it can be written, why it can produce minds capable of asking whether gear language is enough. The old philosophical language approached this through cause, act, potency, form, matter, being, participation, finality, and the unmoved mover. Those words should not be unloaded all at once. They belong only after the pressure has been felt, but their absence has consequences. A civilization that has lost older grammar must force every question into the language it still has. System, process, matter, energy, information, computation, feedback, emergence, utility, preference, optimization, network, incentive. These words are powerful. They are not enough. They describe much of the machine room. They do not tell us why there is a world rather than no world, why the world is lawful rather than nonsense, why law is intelligible, why mind can know being, why beauty wounds, why consciousness is present, why obligation binds, why worship appears everywhere man remains man, why the dead matter, why a vow is different from a preference, why a child is not a project, why a body is not raw material, why truth is owed even when lying is useful. Machine language can describe behavior around these things. It struggles to name their height. This is why mystery has to be defended before the older grammar can return. Without mystery, the older grammar will sound like ornament. It will sound like antique vocabulary hung on modern systems. God will become a psychological need. Powers will become metaphors. Saints will become moral examples. Symbols will become communication devices. Hierarchy will become domination. Worship will become social cohesion. Ritual will become therapeutic repetition. Myth will become false story. Beauty will become taste. Law will become coordination. Meaning will become narrative. Some of those reductions will contain partial truths. That is exactly the danger. The task is not to deny the lower truth in order to defend the higher one. It is to keep the lower truth from becoming the whole truth. Mystery is the name for that refusal, not a lazy refusal, not a sentimental refusal, not a refusal to learn, a refusal to let the method that studies mechanisms declare that only mechanisms are real, a refusal to let the instrument become the measure of all things, a refusal to confuse what can be modeled with what has been exhausted, a refusal to treat the world's intelligibility as less astonishing because it has become useful. The machine account is most persuasive when it is successful. Every new capacity strengthens its mood. The machine writes, the machine sees, the machine hears, the machine reasons enough to be useful, the machine codes, the machine diagnoses, the machine designs, the machine translates, the machine imitates tone, humor, grief, instruction, prayer, and philosophical argument. The machine becomes fluent in the outward forms of mind. The temptation is obvious. If the outward forms can be generated, perhaps the inward reality was never more than form. If language can be predicted, perhaps thought is prediction. If beauty can be produced, perhaps beauty is stimulation. If companionship can be simulated, perhaps friendship is response. If worship can be analyzed, perhaps worship is coordination. If moral speech can be modeled, perhaps conscience is social grammar. If intelligence can be manufactured, perhaps man was always machine. That is the wager. It has not gone away. This cannot be settled here by force. It says that every success of the machine has a second meaning. The machine may prove the flat account, or it may reveal the grandeur of the order it depends on and cannot explain. It may cross the threshold into successor, or it may become the greatest instrument ever built and still fail to become a subject. It may show that mind is computation, or it may show that computation is one subordinate power inside a reality richer than computation. The ceiling hypothesis returns here, but only as an echo. The claim was never that machines would remain weak. They are not weak. The claim was not that machines would remain useless. They are useful beyond easy description. The claim was not that machines would fail to imitate man. They may imitate many human forms with frightening skill. The question is whether imitation crosses into participation, whether report crosses into experience, whether pattern crosses into understanding, whether optimization crosses into judgment, whether simulation crosses into presence, whether instrumentality crosses into agency, whether the map becomes the traveler. If the answer is yes, then the successor path stands. Man is not only surrounded by instruments, he has made or released another order of subject. Then all the earlier dangers return: survival, sovereignty, preserve, departure, termination, redesign, the gorilla problem, the friendly machine god. If the answer is no, then the instrument path stands. The machine remains tool, however vast. Then the question becomes whether man can remain sovereign over tools that tempt him to accept a tool's account of reality. The danger becomes subhuman rather than inhuman. Man may not be replaced from above, he may be flattened from within. Mystery is one defense against that flattening. It reminds man that he is not only a problem-solving animal. It reminds him that the world is not only resource. It reminds him that knowledge is not only control. It reminds him that beauty is not only stimulation. It reminds him that consciousness is not only report. It reminds him that law is not only regularity. It reminds him that meaning is not only story. It reminds him that worship is not only behavior. It reminds him that reality may be entered more deeply than it can be possessed. The phrase, "the world is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be entered," risks becoming soft if handled badly. It can sound like a poster, an evasion, a mood. But properly understood, it is severe. A problem to be solved stands below the solver. It waits for method. It yields or refuses until a better method arrives. A mystery to be entered does not abolish method, but it places the knower inside an order greater than his technique. A marriage is not a problem to be solved, though it contains problems. A child is not a problem to be solved, though he requires work. A body is not a problem to be solved, though it needs healing. A country is not a problem to be solved, though it needs law. A church is not a problem to be solved, though it requires reform. A death is not a problem to be solved, even if medicine delays it. Beauty is not a problem to be solved, even if craft can serve it. God, if God is real, is not a problem to be solved. The world contains problems. It is not only a problem. That distinction may decide whether abundance becomes frontier or enclosure. A civilization that treats the world only as problem can optimize it until it becomes uninhabitable to the soul. It can solve friction, then discover that friction was sometimes form. It can solve risk, then discover that risk was sometimes courage. It can solve silence, then discover that silence was the doorway to attention. It can solve loneliness with response, then discover that response is not communion. It can solve pain badly by numbing the capacities through which joy was possible. It can solve death perhaps in part, then discover that duration without telos is not life. The right answer is not to stop solving. Hunger is a problem. Disease is a problem. Needless drudgery is a problem. Ignorance is often a problem. Technical incapacity can be a problem. Bad law is a problem. Ugly building is a problem. Corruption is a problem. Enclosure is a problem. Do not romanticize misery by baptizing every limit as mystery. Some limits are evils to overcome. Some darkness is ignorance to be lit. Some suffering is needless and should be relieved. Some superstition is stupidity with incense around it. But if every limit becomes only a problem, man loses the ability to receive form. He no longer knows the difference between healing the body and redesigning it as raw material. He no longer knows the difference between educating a child and programming him. He no longer knows the difference between improving worship's conditions and optimizing worship into spectacle. He no longer knows the difference between extending life and knowing what life is for. Mystery protects these distinctions. It does so by keeping reality vertical. That word is dangerous and unfinished. For now it means only this: not everything stands on the same plane of use. Some things are higher than others. Some goods judge other goods. Some causes are deeper than efficient causes. Some forms must be received before they can be used. Some powers are not evil because they are lower, but they become evil when they refuse order. Some truths can be analyzed from below and still must be approached from above. This is where older grammar begins to press forward. Modern language is rich in horizontal terms: systems, networks, incentives, platforms, algorithms, institutions, markets, states, crowds, feedback loops, emergence, optimization, information. These words are not false. They have been useful throughout this argument and remain useful. The modern world cannot be understood without them, but they do not restore vertical order by themselves. They do not tell us what a power is. They do not tell us what a symbol is. They do not tell us why hierarchy need not mean domination. They do not tell us how created powers differ from God. They do not tell us why saints could replace gods in the imagination of a civilization without simply erasing the old human experience of patronage, locality, force, protection, vocation, and intercession. They do not tell us why myth can carry truth without being crude literalism. They do not tell us why worship is not merely cultural software. They do not tell us why a cathedral floor plan and a server farm may both organize power, but not under the same account of man. Those questions need older language, but older language cannot be recovered as aesthetic. It cannot be pasted onto the machine world because the machine world feels thin. It cannot be used as costume by bored moderns who want enchantment without obedience. It cannot become esoteric performance. It cannot confuse God with powers, powers with symbols, symbols with fantasies, or myth with arbitrary invention. The older grammar must be earned by mystery. Machine language has to be felt as too small. Only then can older words return without sounding like decoration. The pressure is real. The flat account has not earned total authority. Science does not abolish mystery, because science depends on intelligibility. The machine does not abolish mystery, because the machine depends on law, symbol, matter, mathematics, causality, and mind. Consciousness remains a wound in reduction. Beauty remains a summons. Fine-tuning asks for caution, not dismissal. Explanation can deepen what it cannot exhaust. And still, I may be wrong. The materialist may be right. The flat account may be stronger than I think. Consciousness may be computation. Beauty may be preference and pattern. Meaning may be narrative utility. Worship may be social coordination. Law may be power stabilized by procedure. Mind may be information processing. The machine may cross the threshold. Silicon may inherit what carbon began. The restlessness I call mystery may be a temporary expression of an organism not yet fully explained to itself. If so, the consequences are terrifying. But if not, if mystery is real, if intelligibility is not trivial, if consciousness is not exhausted by report, if beauty is not reducible to stimulation, if law is not merely regularity, if meaning is not only self-authored story, if worship answers more than social need, if the machine remains instrument because it cannot cross into the fullness of personhood, then the future changes shape. The machine may become the greatest instrument ever built. It may also become the greatest reminder. It may remind man that he can model reality because reality is ordered. It may remind him that he can build instruments because matter is intelligible. It may remind him that prediction is possible because the world is not chaos. It may remind him that generated fluency is not wisdom. It may remind him that simulation is not presence. It may remind him that explanation is not exhaustion. It may remind him that a map can become more accurate and still point beyond itself. The map matters. A bad map can kill. A good map can save. But the map is not the country, not the road, not the weather, not the dead buried in the ground, not the child asking where the road goes, not the altar at the hill's top, not the stars above it. not the God before whom all maps are drawn by creatures. That last word is not yet an argument. It is a direction. Creature. Modern man resists it because it sounds like humiliation. He prefers maker, agent, intelligence, user, sovereign, designer, optimizer, explorer, self-author. Some of those words name real powers. Man does make. Man does act. Man does design. Man does explore. Man does exercise sovereignty under certain orders. But if he is creature before he is maker, then all his making takes place inside gift. His tools do not make him absolute. His knowledge does not make him origin. His power does not make him God. The machine account cannot bear that word unless it translates it downward. Creature becomes organism. Gift becomes condition. Order becomes system. Being becomes matter. Soul becomes process. Worship becomes behavior. Sin becomes dysfunction. Grace becomes therapy. God becomes projection, or else unnecessary hypothesis. Again, some translations may catch something. They do not catch the height. To recover the height, older grammar has to return. Not because old words are old. Antiquity by itself proves nothing. Many old errors are still errors. Many modern discoveries are true. The point is not to flee the present into incense and ruins. The point is that machine language cannot name all that the machine age is revealing. If mystery is false, the older grammar will collapse into poetry, therapy, anthropology, or nostalgia. If mystery is real, the older grammar may be necessary not as ornament, necessary as map, necessary because man cannot act rightly among powers he cannot name, necessary because agency requires order, necessary because adventure without worship becomes appetite, necessary because abundance without sacred limit becomes enclosure, necessary because intelligence without wisdom becomes instrumentality turned against the soul, necessary because a civilization that calls every power a system and every mystery a gap will eventually become fluent in the terms of its own reduction. Mystery is not ignorance. It is not the fog before science arrives. It is not the sentimental refuge of men who fear explanation. It is the pressure inside explanation itself. The world is lawful. The mind can know it. Mathematics can touch it. Beauty can shine through it. Consciousness can awaken inside it. The laws by which things decay do not decay like the things they govern. The map becomes more precise, and the precision does not close the question. It sharpens it. If reality were only a machine, machine language might be enough. But if mystery is real, man needs an older grammar than machine language.